Thank you so much. Well, welcome to you that are joining us. It's so fun to do this and feel connected to teachers and students who are working on their art and have been probably since September. So here we are, late February. This was always a hard time as a high school art teacher when I had 15, 18 kids doing the AP exam because they start getting tired at the end of February. So I'm hoping I give you some motivation and some tips. I'll start at the beginning, kind of just rounding out what the AP exam is, just to make sure you haven't missed anything along the way. Um, let's see, at the end, if you would like to have somebody score your portfolio or a student portfolio, I'm going to right now put this in the chat, and then I'll do it again at the end too. Okay, so let me do that. And we'll send it to everyone. Okay, so this is the link you would go to. It's in the chat for you at the end if you have a student that wants to have somebody look at their artwork. This is a little bit of my artwork. It's kind of a nice way to open up. I consider myself an artist. I do art right along with the kids. And that is my biggest suggestion to teachers. Try to do art along with your kids because you'll understand it on another level. And my high school art teacher did her art next to us, and we would all be really excited when she would have something coming out of the kiln. And that was always a thrilling moment for all of us. Okay, so my name is Peg Dunsworth. I was an online AP teacher for 2 years with iArt, the company that's putting this together tonight. I taught students previously to that for 31 years in St. Louis, Missouri, 16 years for AP Studio Art and Art History. So because I did studio art and AP Art History, I really kind of blended the two together and would encourage kids to take both. So there's a little bit of an art history love and push that I do with my students. I've been an AP reader for 11 years plus 4 years as a table leader. And like Edward had alluded to, a table leader kind of guides the readers. So a little bit different level. Okay. So the format of this presentation, there's two parts of the exam. I'm going to kind of briefly run through that. There is the digital submission of the 15 images of the sustained investigation, as well as the 5 best works, both done digitally now. I'll explain the different portfolios, drawing, 3D, 2D, and what we're looking for. I'll discuss how an artist, like real artists, we want our students to really think like artists do, how an artist will question, think, discover, play, and create, and how they make art. And I'll also explain some tips for earning maybe a higher score, something that you didn't know that could be just a little tweak that students can do to help the reader to give you more points. I love having questions and thoughts along the way. I highly encourage you to ask questions because it makes it for a richer experience. I'll try to take a breath sometimes and ask for feedback from you all. And whether you're a student or a teacher, your voice is valued. I want to hear what you have to say. And you'll notice I put pictures. We're very visual being artists. And some of them are mine, and later a lot of them are my students' work. Okay, the first part of the exam has 3 basic skills. We want to know that really the colleges want to know. They're getting college credit for this. The colleges want to know that these incoming students that are getting this AP credit can think, can seek, search out some information, discover something. They can investigate something deep. They are thinkers, right? That's important. Think about what are some other words that could describe that. I just gave you the inquiry, question, seek, investigate. All those words you want to keep thinking about. Like it's more than just an idea. You want to dive into it. The second skill is making art through practicing, playing, experimenting, trying something that maybe nobody has done before, and revising it to make it better. And then the third skill is how you talk about your art. And for College Board, they want you to write little bits and pieces about your art. So you think about, how can you tell the readers, us, something that we can't see? So this is one of my art pieces. Maybe what is something I could say instead of just acrylic paint, oil paint, canvas, maybe something I could say on this scale about how these are all doorways and possibilities in life. And sometimes the door is solid closed and sometimes it's open. So maybe that's something I could communicate instead of just, it's an oil painting. The first part of the exam is the digital submission. You're creating art that is led by an inquiry. Your ideas and how you research and seek are what's taking you from one to another. So when my student Lucy did this one, then I asked her questions, and then it led her to this one. And this is the finished work of this one. And then that led her to this one. So every time you do something, you think, do I want to experiment with a different media next? Did I finish that thought? Do I want to change courses a little bit? So this is an example, like a screenshot of Lucy's AP exam. Again, 15 images, some finished, some process, some finished, some process. I always had my kids do about 10 works. So I say maybe 9 to 12 completed works. Not everything is going to be great, so they might not submit all 12. Sustained investigation begins with a question, a thought, a curiosity. What is the difference between a theme and art that is guided by the need to discover? Like, I want to know something. How can, I go deeper with this subject? And what started with me was, for years, I would go on trips and take pictures of doors and windows. And so I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I so enamored with doors? And it really led to my journey through life. So that's my question. This is very challenging thing for students to do. It's challenging for us to do. And that takes me back to saying, teachers, if you're on tonight, I highly encourage you to do a sustained investigation idea along with your students. First of all, you will sympathize and empathize a whole lot more because it's hard. And secondly, they'll see how you're, running into roadblocks and learning along the way. So it's very motivating. Okay, so a theme would be like this wheel. Your theme could be something like, here I have cars. I had a student that said, Miss Dunsworth, I want to do cars. And I said, okay, why cars? I just got a new car. Okay, what kind of car is it? What's a Ford? Okay, so are Fords the best car to you? No, it's just the car I got. Okay, so why cars? Well, I'm going to draw my dad's car next and then my grandpa's car next. Okay, but why cars? I kept asking why. And eventually I got to the point where the student said, well, sometimes my dad and I work on an old truck that was my grandpa's. And so I asked him, do you think this is more about like family or father-son relationship rather than cars? So we have to get to the why with the students. The best teacher will not give answers, but keep asking them questions to help them discover. So the wheel is not really what we want. We don't want to do a red car, a blue car, even motorcycles, all sorts of transportation with trucks. That's still just a theme. We want it to be almost like a tree. So I'll tell my students, think about a tree trunk that branches off, or a river that might have little lakes that or creeks that you branch off. So you want to have an idea that evolves. Here's those words: seek, search, discover again. That's actually on our rubric when we're grading. Do we think the student is seeking something, searching something? And I'm going to go back to that. So when you're writing about your artwork, write down, I researched blah, 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 or I discovered at this point, because those buzzwords will help that reader slow down for a minute and go, oh, I need to give points where they're seeking, searching, and discovering. Okay, your investigation should be something that is very personal and you want to learn about and explore and research. Okay, so my students that are out there tonight with me listening, is anyone doing something that is about them and their sustained investigation? So if someone wants to unmute, and we'll see if I can hear you. Is anyone doing something that's about you?
Yeah, so my sustained investigation is primarily about daydreaming or dissociation.
Oh,
Um,
I love that. I love that. Great. Okay, so that's something that you're already thinking about as a human being and wondering, if I'm daydreaming about this, is that important to me? So that's what we want. In that AP art class, we want students investigating something that is personal and about them because then it's more important to them. You want to learn more. And we can tell as readers if you're excited about it and learning something. So I'm thrilled to hear that you've got something that's about you. Thank you. Really, we're the only class where it's all about you. Okay, what media are you good at? So if you're not sure, um, like what media you're good at, then maybe think about which projects did I get the highest points on, or which projects seemed easy to me? Because once you find a media that you can manipulate and you're really good at, then you can explore other medias on top of it. And that's that experimentation. And we want you to write about, I experimented with bleach on an old pair of my jeans or on black mat board. We want you experimenting. So this time of year when my students, were getting kind of tired and running out of ideas, I would say, I'm bringing in bleach, bring old clothes to wear that day, and we're going to try it on different types of paper, and they would just paint with an old paintbrush with bleach. So that's something to explore. Okay, skill 2 is create art by practicing, experimenting, and revising art. So here are 3 artists you might know. Georgia O'Keeffe. This is a photograph. She also explored clay later in life in her 90s. Picasso, he was so inventive with all of his different styles, the blue period, the rose period, cubism, like all his statue period, where he painted these heavy figures that look like statues. But did you know that he even experimented with clay? And then Henri Matisse did a lot of paper cutting, did a lot of painting, and later in life, he was more bound to a wheelchair or in bed. So he would design things. Someone else could make the stained glass, but he designed it. So artists really do explore different materials, and you should too. Okay, your sustained investigation. This is an older one I have of a student's example when we used to have 12, but now it's 15 images. Students make works of art based on an in-depth investigation. We don't want you to do it in a month or 2 months. We want it to be several months in a row. And we want you researching materials, how you use the materials with different processes and ideas. But most importantly, it's over time. That's the sustained parts, deep, sustained investigation. It also involves practice, experimentation, revision using materials, processes, and ideas, right? And students are required to submit a written response that gives information about their artwork. There are 2 writing prompts. Hopefully, you've already been working on I call it a paragraph, 600 characters. That's about, 5 sentences. It's about a paragraph. And I have my students do this all throughout the year. And like at the beginning of each month, we rewrite it again because as you work on your investigation, things will come to you, you will learn, and you will want that in that paragraph. So the first part is a paragraph, and the question is identify the question or questions that guided your sustained investigation. You might see the word inquiry. What is your inquiry that guided your sustained investigation? Again, it's not a theme. A theme doesn't guide you, it just is a slightly different tweak. We want this guiding you. 600 characters, including the spaces. Describe, this is the second part of your second paragraph, describe how your sustained investigation shows evidence of practice, experimentation, revision, guided by your question. We want you to tell us how you did it. Okay, skill 3, communicate something to the viewer that maybe the reader can't tell. So maybe I don't know everything that this student used and why he has one eye smaller and one eye bigger and why there's no body here. So maybe tell me that instead of, I painted a background, I outlined a figure, like give me something that I can't already tell. And then on each work of art, each of your 15 slides, we need you to say what materials you used, processes you used, and the size. And you'll see they each say 100 characters. That's barely a sentence. So you want it to be as succinct as possible. Okay, tips. The most successful responses are clear. Clearly, they relate to the art. I can look at the art and read it and get the aha. They want to be completely addressing the prompts. If I'm asking you to tell me how you used your processes, tell me exactly how you did that. Don't just say, mixed media, I painted it. Like, give me details. Provide evidence of an inquiry-based sustained investigation where you're telling me I practiced in image 2 with watercolor. I experimented with thinning down acrylic paint in image 3. And then I revised that by doing oil paint on top. Use those buzzwords. Responses are not evaluated for correct spelling, grammar, or punctuation. So if you misspell a word, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just try to get it as close as possible. Okay, so this is an example of my past student, Kelsey's 5 images that she submitted as her 5 best work. So this is the second part of the exam. It's called Selected Works. You'll see these are all a little different. So they don't all have to be the same media. They don't all have to be from your sustained investigation. She was doing a portfolio that had to do with a mask that people wear. And so it, was easy to start with this. And then my students had to work from life. So she grabbed an old doll out of a trunk in my storeroom and she was playing with the idea of like melting cheese. So melting something on the face of the baby is like a mask. And she got inspired by Salvador Dali, how he like melts those clocks. And then this was when she found out she didn't make it into an art show, which who cares? It's one art show, but she was devastated. So she drew herself that night. So these are 3 different masks, but you could see the accordion and the light bulbs have nothing to do with masks. So some were from other classwork and some was from her sustained investigation. Okay, in the 3D design, students send in 2 views of each piece. So it looks like they have more slides to fill. It's still 5 works of art, but they would have 10 images. And then everybody else has the 5 images. But I want to tell you, if you want to do multiple images in one slide, you certainly could, especially if you're 3D. You could have a walk around a vase with 4 images in one slide. Okay. Selected works need to demonstrate synthesis of materials. So what materials you chose. So here, Marilyn was using collage. So she was using magazines. So how she cut up the magazines, how she glued them, overlapped them, painted on them. That's a process. And then her idea that had to do with the breakdown of humans. So that all came together. It synthesized it all. That material, the way she did it with her idea, like grew together. That's synthesis. For each work, students are required to submit just a short writing on each one. Again, we want to know what materials you used, what your ideas were, maybe processes, maybe size. On selected works, you don't need the whole paragraph. And by the way, please listen. We as readers do not see the 15 images and the 5 best works at the same time. They're totally different readers. 2 readers read the sustained investigation separately at their computer. They submit scores. Then a whole different 2 readers read the best work. So you need to put finished works in the 15 images and then pick your 5 very best designs or drawings or 3D images that you can put in your selected works. And those are graded kind of holistically. So if you have a clunker, like maybe one is like middle of the road, but the rest are really good, it's hard as a reader. We might not be able to give you the top score because you've got one really weak one in there. So you want to make sure they're all just the best of the best. Works need to demonstrate whatever your portfolio is. So if you're in design, we want to see that you know how to use color, and you know how to manipulate that composition, and you know how to jazz in a little bit of texture or pattern in there. Okay, this is kind of interesting. So I'm going to walk you through this. 3 portfolios, 2D, 3D in the middle, and then drawing portfolio is on the far right. You'll notice it says 5 works. This will be done digitally as your selected works, and 15 images digitally. 10 digital images because it's 3D. We want to see different sides, a top, a bottom, inside out, left, right, and then still 15 digital images. And then in drawing, 5 digital works, and then the 15 digital images. So 2 parts, all digital. Look at this. The selected works is 40% of your overall score. The sustained investigation that you're writing your 2 paragraphs on, and you're letting me visit your studio and see what you did along the way, and you're telling me what you were thinking along the way. That's 60%. So both are very important. Okay, a drawing portfolio, one of the biggest things we're looking for is mark making, how you use line, how you use that surface space, how you show values that take something flat and make it a 3D form, that illusion of form, how you use your composition. Students can work with any material, analog or digital. Analog is like Will did with oil pastels here. You're drawing in real life, or it could be digital drawing. Could be painting, any kind of paint. You could even paint with bleach, like I said earlier. It could be printmaking, monoprints. You could do linoleum cuts. It could be mixed media. Anything, sky's the limit. Think about how else could I make marks? Could I make marks with a thumbprint? Could I make marks with charcoal that are like scribble marks? Can I make marks with stitching? Can I make marks with dots? Can I make marks with yarn? Think about other possibilities that maybe nobody else has thought of, because those are the portfolios that are so fun to grade when you're like, holy cow, look what this 17-year-old thought to use. Okay, this is an example of a drawing portfolio. I don't have her process slides in there, but you can see she's drawing and she understands how to show form on that flat surface, even though it's nice design too. Okay, this is 2D design. This happened to be a linoleum cut. This is a mixed media. This is photography. In 2D art, we are looking at the elements and principles of design. And you could even Google the rubric for College Board Art and Design. And on the back of the rubric, they list out on like a vocabulary page, they list out all the elements and principles of design that they think are valuable. So in my classroom, I didn't have something that said point. I didn't have something that said figure ground relationship. I didn't have something that said juxtaposition, but hierarchy. But all those are so important. So I have my students write those in their sketchbook and maybe do a little scribble next to it or an explanation next to it that tells what you know, what it's all about. What does that mean? And they can also use any kind of media. It could be fabric, it could be illustration, it could be collage, digital design, photography, really anything you want. 3D art, still elements and principles of design, but we're really looking to see how they occupied the space. That's your positive. And then the unoccupied space is negative. So the negative space in my weaving here is the space between the coils. Negative space in this is inside that vessel and form, as well as in between. Students should consider how materials, processes, and ideas can be used to make the work really involve space, any little details with space. And they can use any, sometimes trash is so interesting, or popsicle sticks. I know that sounds really juvenile, or straws, but sometimes kids just like blow my mind with what they do with styrofoam cups, coffee filters. Like it's so cool. Here is an image of a student's work in my classroom, and it was before they went in the kiln, and I just thought they looked so beautiful there. So I told her real quick, throw some white paper behind that, and let's just take a picture of these in this unfired, you know, it's greenware still, no glaze or anything on it. I just thought it was so beautiful. So that would be a good process slide for your 15 images. Okay, so these are things that we're looking for in our 3D design. Really, it's just the elements and principles, as well as that occupied, unoccupied space. And you can see the subtlety of how these lean, or how this goes up higher and lower. It's subtleties with 3D. Okay, this is the writing part for selected works. Ideas, materials, processes, and size is what they'll write. Little sentence for each one. It's short and sweet. Okay, now I'm going to show you a real quick video of an artist. Let's see if I could pull this up.
I think of myself as a woman.
Okay, so this is an artist. She's a young lady who is alive during our students' time. You want to make sure you have an artist that you represent every student in your classroom. If you have someone who moved to your building from Nicaragua, you want to find an artist from Nicaragua. Like, you want to make sure they have someone they could relate to. And she's actually doing everything that I just told you that artists do. They seek, they discover, they experiment. Okay.
An Igbo woman, a Nigerian, an African, a person of color, an artist. And the fascinating thing is that the layers I add to how I identify myself changes over time, just keeps broadening as I move farther out into the world. This is a family album, and oh no, and say, brace yourself. Every photograph my family has from when my parents got married till when I moved to America, so maybe like late 90s, early 2000s, is in this one album. 6 children. We're talking over 20 years, one album. But this is probably our family's most valued possession. The figures in the work are based on my family, my life. My husband shows up in the work a lot. My siblings have been showing up in a series. I'll also look for things like plants. I've been doing a combination of plants that I found in Los Angeles, but also plants that I found in Nigeria. So you have this garden that really is nonsensical as well. Being a Nigerian woman who was also American at the same time, felt like a very fascinating space. And it was a space I knew I wasn't the only one who inhabited. I wanted to contribute to the new crop of people who were really talking about that space or trying to explore that space, not just in art, in literature, in music, in fashion. Another thing that is
Okay, I'm
in
gonna zip
in
forward.
Lagos, and she's in a setting that speaks to high modern architecture in New York. But then there's an old school TV that is playing Nigerian news from the 80s. So once people really begin to pull the space apart and what's happening, there is this feeling of being unable to put either the character or the space in a clearly defined box because it doesn't exist. So that's the first layer.
Okay, I'm gonna pause this and put this in the chat. So I would show my students a video every day they came in my room. And even when I taught online, I would show students these videos, and it helps them to hear what other artists are dealing with and say, because it's very similar to what they're dealing with. So that's my plug on make sure to show them our other artists. Okay, so we're asking our students to think of something that they could research, something that they could question. So here's Claude Monet, and I have some of his haystacks and some of his Japanese footbridge. So I would ask my students, what is he exploring? What is he discovering? So you might hear, oh, nature, or he's discovering outdoor plants. Well, those are true, but really what he's doing is wondering, does color change as the sun moves? So really he's researching the sunshine and how much that changes colors and even seasons. Like deep in the summer, colors might be different than the fall. So that's what he's researching. And so once I show my students that and I get them thinking about artists, then they tell me something that they would like to do. And then I try to pair them up with at least one artist. Sometimes you can come up with lots. So if I have someone who is really into mark making, I had a student who loves stippling. So I had her look at Paul Signac, and this beautiful stippling, it's almost like little tiny dash marks of paint, has such beautiful movement and use of color. And she was doing black and white, and this like opened up ideas for her. So if I have a student who loves design, flat 2D design, or portraits, or they love gold, I have them look at Gustav Klimt. Janet Fish does beautiful reflections. Chuck Close is a great one for portraiture. Before his like artery collapsed in his spine, when he could do realistic photos like in the 70s and 80s, and now it's more pixelated because of his health. So two big changes in his style. Franz Marc does beautiful things with animals. Frida Kahlo, Personal Story of Health. Kara Walker, she's talking about being an African American woman and what that means. Salvador Dali is talking about dreams. So I try to pair up my students with an artist who's doing something similar to them. Also, I like to show my students how artists evolve. So my artists might have heard of Mondrian and seen this image, maybe in elementary or middle school, but they hadn't seen where his work originated. So when you see he started with nature, which is organic, but then he was so enamored and fascinated by the breakdown of where the branches are positive, negative, that he went very simplified. And later in life, it broke down to this. So I want my students to see how artists do discover. Henry Moore started with family units, like a mom, a dad, a couple kids, and then it went to just this beautiful organic, positive, negative space of human forms, very abstract. And I talk to students about nature. If they love drawing plants, maybe we want to go outside and do something with the plants and make some kind of earthwork. And I show them Richard Long or Andy Goldsworthy. Tara Donovan, she's the one with the cups, the straws, the pencils, coffee filters, toothpicks. So these are all things that kids might have at home and think, how could I arrange these in a different way? Edvard Munch, my kids always knew this one, the scream. But did you know that his mother died and he watched her slowly die, linger, and then have the funeral in his childhood home? And then his sister, who was taking care of him, she got sick. I don't know what they had, but it was horrible for him. He felt very unstable as a young boy. And so that led to his, piece that made him so famous. I have my students go on Art 21. You can search artists. You could explore themes. You could look up different mediums. If I have a student who wants to do photography, I have them find 3 different photographers on Art 21. And these are great because they're artists from the 21st century. So they're usually alive while our kids are alive. And they also see videos and hear the artist. And this is Barry McGee, a student of mine, found him on Art 21. And he had someone who said, hey, I want to do like a retrospective of your artwork that you've done up to now. So they grabbed artwork that he was doing in college. And Barry was much older than college, doing, what he felt like was much better things. And they assembled it in a gallery space and then invited him in to see it. And, I think back to what I did as a college art student. You're just learning, you're just growing. And I would be very embarrassed and like, why did they put this up? And that's exactly what he was saying. And my students, they thought his ink pen drawings were so beautiful. And he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did so many of these. And it was fun for the kids to hear him. And then here's an artist who's a photographer who's photographing underwater. It's like this makeshift fish tank. And he's filming everything kind of upside down. Just so cool. And while we're talking about all these different artists, it's a good time to mention we want to make sure to really be mindful of not using another artist's idea. If you're going to use the idea, you need to change it 6, 7, 8 times to make it your own. So artist integrity, do not plagiarize somebody else's artwork, even if it's just, well, that artist did it in oil paint and I'm going to do it in acrylic paint or watercolor. We don't really want you doing that. We want you to come up with something that is really your own idea. So try not to duplicate another artist's work. I'm gonna share this too. Each year, College Board during the AP Read has a couple readers, and I had the wonderful opportunity to do it one year. And you are picking the best of the best. Okay, I put it in the chat. And these works of art, let's see. I think I talk about it. College Board. It's the digital design exhibition. These students created something very unique. They're creative, they're out of the box, they're inventive. More than anything, not only were these kids talented, but they blew our minds. So we get 50 students. Okay, so let me get out of this again. And let's see, okay, so let's just do this. This is my big tip. Whenever you look up anything in College Board, you're going to look up and go, well, this isn't what I wanted. And if you scroll down, then you'll start to find what you wanted. So good time to talk about that. These are alphabetized by the student's first name. I haven't even looked at this one yet, but let's look at this one. So here's a picture of the student, the artwork that we're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then you could see they wrote a little bit of a blurb about it, their student statement. If we scroll down some more writing, then the teacher talked. Sometimes there's something from the principal, sometimes a video. Let's see, can I just go back? Okay, so you could see there's 3D work on here. Let's look at hers. Hers is very interesting. So again, if the students are coming into the room or you're a student and you're like, I need something else to inspire me, go see what kids are doing that are your age. This student put up several images. Here's the teacher's statement. Oh, and if I go to the bottom, I could go to the next student. Oh, I saw this one. This is so cool. So this is, again, a way that you could see what other kids are doing, and you're seeing how they put it in the kiln, how big that was, how they glazed it. Like, so cool. All right, that's another tip of mine, to really spend some time on that. And I think these go all the way back during the pandemic. So before 2019, before 2020, we had a traveling art show, but now literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids can look at it because it's always digital. So I put that in the chat, and you could even say Art and Design Exhibition 2020, and you could look at years past. Okay, how are we doing on time? Let me run through this really quick, and then I'm going to do questions. So these are some examples of how you could do a slide. Your slide work, and of course you wouldn't have the writing on it, but I've got that there for you to see. The slide work could show what inspired you, your process, and a finished piece. Or it could show you process like this, and the finished piece could be on a separate page. These are my works. Here I did it all in one. I try not to do more than 3 or 4 images in one. Way at the beginning, I showed you Lucy's, and she would put 5 or 6 in one, but I'm going to tell you they're too small, and as a reader, it's hard to make out. She wanted to be more obvious, so just put in the pictures that are very helpful along the way. This one shows I started with this work of art in watercolor. Then I cleared gesso over it, and I played around with white gesso in kind of an organic form. Then I decided I wanted to somehow adhere some masks. This was during COVID to it. You could see, instead of just putting them on like that, I cut little parts of them. And then this is my final work. So on this one, the size could just say NA, not applicable. You don't need the size on it, but I do have it on this one. Okay, and then one more reminder that if you stay tuned and you go to iartusa.com/prescore/, that will get you to a site where you guys could work together, and they could give you suggestions on your portfolio. Okay, I wanted to keep it at 45 minutes because I want lots of time for questions. And I've got other things up here that I could share if you'd like. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask me anything about the AP exam or your artwork, I'm here.
Real quick, for the pre-score thing, how much does that cost per student or per portfolio?
I believe $90. We'll see if.
We changed that to 60. Actually.
Okay, $60. Thank you.
All right, good to know. Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Hi, could you go over again the keywords that like you're hoping or wanting to see in students' SIs?
Oh, okay, so let's scroll back up. Like the buzzwords is what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so jot this down. Seek, S-E-E-K, seek, search, and discover, as well as practice, experimented, and revised. So a revision could be like this tree trunk. Your revision could be, I actually started on pathways and journeys and making like patterns out of lines. And then my branch off, my revision was doing doors, whether they were open or closed, whether there's a doorknob or not. So your revision could be mental, or a revision could be, oh, I didn't like this background, so I cut out this and I collaged the background the second time. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good question. Good listener. Other questions?
I actually kind of have a question.
Yeah.
You said that what's it called? There was a 15 slide requirement, but you
Yes.
did not necessarily need 15 pieces. You said 10 to 12 can be acceptable. What's the lowest amount of
Oh,
completed pieces you've seen
it's a
during
good
school?
question. So, I have seen them as few as 4 or 6 works, and they just filled it with their experimentation, like Lucy did here. But I tell you what, as a reader, you're like, well, even those 4 are good. Other kids have done 15. You'll see ones that have 15 finished slides, and then they talk about how they revised, and you see they're using different media, so they are practicing. So you'll see everything. I would say you'll see everything from like 8 to 12, but I've seen as few as 4 and as many as 15. So the more you do, the more talented you get, the better your technical skill is. So I'd encourage my students to do between 9 and 12. That's a very good question, Edward.
And a little bit of a follow-up. Let's say you have 10 good pieces, but 5 mediocre or maybe even not great pieces. Should you include those?
Oh, that's a good
Or
question. So we want to see that there's growth. So if like early on, like September and October, you're like, gosh, I was just learning how to draw. You might put 1 or 2 of those in there and say, this is when I was just learning how to draw. And later I became more proficient. So you're telling the person, don't lose me on this first piece that's lower because I get better, as I go. But I don't think I would have a student fill in with weaker ones. I would use the best of the best and then have their process slides show the growth. It's a good question too.
And then I just have another question about the I guess how your images that you're using. Um, for like for the grading, are these pieces being viewed in like chronological order, like 1 to 15? And if you are kind of telling a story between your pieces, does that hinder your score?
Oh, we want you to tell a story between your pieces. We want it to evolve kind of like a story, right? So let me put this in play. So even bigger. Let me take it out. I'm trying to show you how big these would be when we start. They're probably about that big. They're about that big when we start. So we pull open a portfolio and you see this. And then you click to another page and you read their 2 paragraphs. And then you go back to this and you go click and it comes up bigger and then it goes smaller. And you click the next one, comes up bigger, smaller. So first you see it all together, which is kind of nice. It's all there holistically. And then each one fills the screen and it does go consecutive 1, 2, 3, all the way to 15. Good question. I'm just clicking through in case you're like, oh yeah, I wanted to ask something about that.
yeah, and if there are any teachers here that may have any questions, that's fine as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna pull up something else since we have, well, 5, 8 more minutes. Let's use our time. I might put something up there that might provide a thought. Okay, I'm looking for something different that I haven't already talked about. Oh, this is a cool thing. Okay, watch this. Don't blink, it goes really fast.
My goal
Oh,
is to
shoot.
lines in the face.
Let's wait until
Absolutely
that's
okay.
done.
I don't believe in anti-aging products. I don't think
Okay, so this is an artist. You'll hear her marks, but she does not talk. And she's working with charcoal and an eraser. And this is a great one to show your students, or if you're a student, to watch this like 10 times. My kids love for me to bring this up again. So you can see she has 3 animals up close, 1 far away. She's playing with stripes, but she's very experimental. She's trying something and then erasing, and trying something and then erasing it. She goes through these circles and stripes, and then eventually she'll go through a phase of like ladders. Now we see a human in there. Now one animal. There's her ladders. So she's really changing this one work of art over and over again. I like the train track, how that kind of echoed the ladder. And then she'll draw over that. Okay, about to have a really big change here. Okay, do you see how now we have the back end of the animal that's leading you to the middle of the composition where the head is? So this is a great thing to show kids for experimenting. Like, she doesn't care, she just keeps playing with it. So Edward asked earlier, how many pieces of art? She really could have taken, 14 slides along the way.
Oh, yeah, she gets to the other side.
And
One shelf.
hang on, let me grab this for you. Okay. Put this in the chat. Okay, that's that. Barbara Moody. Barbara Moody. So she could have had several different works of art just in that one. That's pretty cool. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. I encourage kids to use sketchbooks. Sometimes if they didn't like how something was sketched in there, I have them gesso over the page, redraw that. The more layers, the better. Here's an artist, write this name down, George Fisher. He is all about layering. We love to see layers because it shows you're experimenting and revising. So layering is great. And that's a real artist that you could look up. Vic Muniz, he's from Brazil. He recreates artwork that, like the Mona Lisa, that Leonardo da Vinci did with paint, and he's done it with peanut butter and jelly. And this is Jackson Pollock, Action Jackson. He's like splatter painting, only Vic did it with chocolate syrup. So it's fun to think about different media you could use. Here's some different ideas there's the toothpicks, the pencils, styrofoam cups. Those are so cool. And it's something so simple. Maybe you want to have them do an installation. I had my kids do that right before holiday break. So late December, they all had a corner of the room, could be a corner of the library. One did a corner in the counseling department, and they did some kind of installation. It just helps break you out of whatever you're doing. Try something different. Experiment, and I don't care how ugly it gets, beat it to death, make it as interesting as possible. Here's another artist, Homer. I'm not sure how you say his name. Ikeda, I say, but I'm not sure how you say it. But he does all these things on top of one piece of art: collage, scribble, cut and paste, spray coffee, ink brayer, watercolor, drip paint. He does all these things to create art, and it really gets you playful. Use the buzzwords. I already had a student that had me talk about that again. Think about synthesis. How do artists who, have artwork in galleries and museums, how are they using their media to show their idea in such a high way? It's a synthesizing thing. This is an AP portfolio that came in a couple of years ago. So this was the original art that the student was inspired by, and this is their work. So they took a picture of themselves with kind of a fun, funky hairstyle, and then their process slides are here, and here's their finished one. And we were talking about with my class about how you could be inspired by another artist, but I want it to look really different. This is a drawing student. She, like Christo and Jean Claude, does drawings and figures out what she wants to do, and then she does it. And that's a drawing portfolio. That kid's so smart. This student's drawing herself. Does that make sense? Here they actually use real chicken wire over their color pencil drawing. Example of revision, another AP reader, Nikki Croy, a student came in with this, and the class critiqued her work and asked her all sorts of questions. And then the following Monday, she came in with this work, and you can see much stronger. The movement, the body is distracting, the clothes are distracting. The hula hoop that had the lights on it, she just dropped to the floor, where this time she was dancing with it. So revise, show your revision. I was playing with lace and oil paint, and then I had this in a corner of my studio and hated it. Didn't throw it out, hated it for years. And then I started working on top of it when I was doing my journey and pathways in life. So I kind of liked it then. This was the original artwork of mine. And then I had my students do it, get a piece of art that you didn't get a good grade on. And I tell them we're gonna beat it to death with other materials and see what we come up with. So I actually cut apart a blouse. It's lace, glued it on there, and then started painting. This was a student's first work, and it's fine. It's nice, good design. And I said, wouldn't it have been cool if you did more detail in the cup? And the cup is more of our focal point. I'm almost too distracted. And that's all I said. And then 2 days later, she came back with this. She scrapped the first one and did a whole new one. And I said, this is why I love working with you. Her name was Alejandra. She would just take my critiques and just make new art all the time. This was her first try. This was her finished. This was the student's first idea. And she was talking about, she's an autistic individual. And she was talking about how autism affects how she sees herself in her life. And so she paints what she feels. And she said, Miss Dunsworth, sometimes I really feel like I'm just falling over. And I said, you should do that. So she took her canvas and made it fall over. Look at that. So cool. This student is drawing herself on cardboard. She's looking at herself here. She had her ideas here. Dad printed out a China map that she used for her clothing. So she's half Chinese, half American. And it was just this process. She kept revising. I love the idea of having a mind map and think about where you're going with it. Okay, more questions at this point? Otherwise, I'll stop.